podcast.
G'day.
Hello.
Salutations.
Get out of my room, I'm playing Minecraft!
We pull ourselves off of Minecraft to join you today. So, welcome back. Today
Except for me, because I'm an old guy.
Today we have Kata, Team Artist. We have Com, Team Project Lead, Team Catgirl. We have Doomsday Rabbit, who's in between animator. We have Morgan, artist and animator, and we have Rook, who is a lovely mod and Neptune's voice actor. So, welcome back, everyone.
G'day.
Yay.
Hello.
Everyone's a little bit
Haven't been
sleepy.
here for a while.
That's okay. So, now we've introduced the guests. Let's see what we're going to do this week. So this week, like last week, we're going to go over a little bit of news. Then we are going to be talking about NASA, who, yes, is definitely a planet.
For sure.
NASA's
NASA best planet. No, we're going to be
Soon
doing a
the
little...
International Space Station will be large enough to be a planet.
Maybe. We're going to do a
Soon, TM.
quick character overview. Not quick. Probably long. Bad words. Then we've got Film Club, as I said last week. So, talking about some of our favourite films. So, that's good. New recommendations for the summer if you're too lazy to read. And then Com is going to be talking about the Banff National Park in Canada in globetrotting. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about recycling and compost in Mission Protect. So, lots of things to look forward to. Let's dive straight into the news this week. So, as a team this week, the couple of things I've written down are the fact that those Meet the Team cards, which I mentioned last week, are out. So, on the server now, if you go into hashtag Meet the Team text channel up near the top, you can find out all your favourite things about all your favourite team members and maybe stalk them in some places you didn't know they were. Some social media that you didn't know they were on, which is quite cool. Find out their favourites.
Please don't.
Please follow me.
Please follow me. Just there are also
Follow me
commands
on
if you do dash meet and then a person, you can do that. So I've seen the reason why I did that is because some of you lovelies like to introduce us to the new people that come on, and I thought I'd make it slightly easier for you. So there you are.
Make sure to like and subscribe and smash that like button, turn on notifications to join the notification squad. I'll see you in the next video.
Ring that bell, ding dong.
See you later, Soul Army.
Yeah, with that SpaceFlower out of the way, the other thing that we've majorly been doing this week, we've already mentioned, which is we started a Minecraft server yesterday, and everyone is no longer working on the project because they're too busy punching trees.
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean? What project?
I'm
I'm not that savage.
sleeping.
We have always had quite a few Minecraft jokes in the team. There was the time that Pecan built the school in Minecraft and such, and we were joking then about animating it frame by frame using wall colours on Minecraft, and I think that's becoming closer to reality as we have slow production on keying frames.
Minecraft Machinima?
Yeah, our animation is going to be on Minecraft. It was a secret until now.
Get ready for bad Minecraft parody songs and cringy animation.
The artist's job now is just to make Minecraft skins for all the voice actors.
Oh, I'll gladly do that.
That would be fun. But yeah, all seriousness aside, we've been animating and there's not much we can tell you about. So, has anyone on the team done something cool that they want to talk about this week, either team-wise or otherwise?
George Lucas stopped by my job.
Oh yeah, that was
That's
quite
pretty
interesting
cool.
because we were talking about that last week, weren't we?
Yep. He just stops by to see a movie, you know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So then,
I'll never forget last week where he did not stop with a George Lucas accent.
Oh, you mean like this?
yeah, let's not bring it back. Let's keep that in episode 14, shall we?
Yeah.
On to
but it only goes up to episode 9.
Damn it, I accidentally used Star Wars vocabulary. Anyway,
Yep.
On to the astronomy/science news for this week. As was pointed out to me about 5 minutes before we started the stream, and I'm not quite sure how I missed this in my research, it is Neil Armstrong's birthday today, or it would be if he hadn't died a couple of years ago. So that's...
Press F to pay respects.
Yeah, press F to pay respects. Obviously, if you don't know, and honestly, what are you doing watching this stream if you don't know who Neil Armstrong is? He was the first man to step foot on the moon.
What is he? That one guy who played the trumpet.
Well, what's this moon?
The moon
A
landing.
projection.
Luna Chan, the best planet. Anyway, so he's famous for his quote of one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah,
That's
quite a hero to our
stuff, yeah.
generation. So would have been his birthday today. In more UK news, the Lovell telescope, which is a big radio telescope we have up in Cheshire, I think it said something like that. I don't know, I can't remember. Every summer for a couple of days, basically because the radio telescope is just a big satellite dish, effectively, and they use it as a giant projector and project art onto it and turn it into a giant rainbow-coloured art installation. So that's what they've done this week. So
that's how they
pretty
project the moon.
Whoops.
God damn it.
Accidentally leaked that. Oops a daisy. It's not NASA after all. It's the European Space Agency. No.
We don't have enough funding to project the moon. We have to outsource.
Oof.
We're just gonna start projecting things on the
Talking
moon.
about NASA outsourcing things, this week NASA announced the names of the 9 astronauts that will be contracted to work with both SpaceX and Boeing on their space adventures starting next year, actually. So that's quite cool. So they've got 9 astronauts. The first ones of them to be launching will be next year. So I have the names here. So aboard the SpaceX Dragon probe thingy, it's like a little capsule. Actually doesn't look too dissimilar to the Moonlander, will be Doug Hurley and Bob Becken. Then in the 2 different companies, Boeing and SpaceX, are both looking at commercial ISS shuttles, and they both have a crew of 2 to test those out. Starting 2020, I think, which is Just Quesada, Sonny Williams, Victor Glover, and Mike Hopkins. And then you've got the CST-100, which is a Boeing big ship thingy, effectively Falcon Heavy, which is going to be piloted by Chris Ferguson, Eric Bowe, and Nicole something that I really can't pronounce, and so I'm not going to try. But those are just some names. There's no pilots or anything announced for any of the Falcon Heavy or Mars missions yet, which is kind of sad. But yeah, people going to space next year. And talking about things going to space, the last bit of news we have this week is something to look out for. So next Saturday is the Parker Solar Probe launch. So the Parker Solar Probe is a NASA probe, I believe. I didn't write it down. Oh dear.
Dear me, not again.
Oh dear me, not again. So yes, it is a NASA probe. Sorry, because I've written down the launch site. It is it's not a solar orbiter. Basically their plan is to just fire it directly into the sun. That's what they want to do. They want to fire a probe into the sun and try and get as much atmospheric data as they can when it kind of gets very close. A bit like they did with Cassini and Saturn last summer. So if you want to watch that, the launch will be live on space.com, courtesy of NASA, and the launch window is 45 minutes starting at 07:48 GMT. So that's about 3:45 in the morning for the local time zone, EST, I think. So very, very early in the morning, and quite early in the morning here in Britain too, but if you want to watch that, that's pretty cool. First probe to go literally directly into the sun if it all goes well. So yeah, and interesting enough, the rockets on that computer is struggling this week. I really need a
Oh
new
shit, gotta tab out of Minecraft.
Goodbye, everyone.
I didn't actually mean it.
Oh yeah, really apologies for the technical difficulties. We
Sorry about that, everyone.
are trying
Yeah.
our very best to solve these in the next couple of weeks. So, anyway, as I was saying,
happened. You have
on
less
to
budget than
NASA.
NASA.
NASA's a probe.
NASA is one of our characters in the show. He's the only character so far that isn't a planetary mass or a star. And obviously he's a space agency run by the American government, or the actual company is like, yeah. NASA, the character, is not a puppet. But yeah,
America.
just
No, but NASA is a probe.
I'm never going to live that down, am I? So, just some quick facts to introduce us. NASA stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It was established by Eisenhower in 1958. It is the civilian space program and the aeronautics and aerospace research project facility thingy for all of America, really, and its research leads to things like the Blackbird, which is the fastest ever plane, and that was one of NASA's research aircraft. So that is my little introduction. So, I would like to hand over to Kata, who has done the research about NASA's early history for this week.
Oh, hi. Yeah. So basically, as mentioned so kindly just earlier, it was established on June 1958 by President Eisenhower, who signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958, establishing the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. The fledgling National Aeronautics and Space Administration Agency absorbed the earlier National Advisory Committee of Aeronautics, also known as NACA,
Calm down.
which was a U.S. federal agency founded on March 3rd, 1915, to undertake, promote, and institutionalize aeronautical research. On October 1st, 1958, the agency NACA was dissolved, and its assets and personnel was formed the core of the newly created National Aeronautics and Space Administration. NASA's first high-profile program was Project TRAP, also known as Project Mercury, an effort to learn if humans could survive.
Oh dear.
Oh god.
We've lost Catter.
Yeah.
We've lost Catter.
Australian
I
internet.
need hydration.
So, what
Australian
What
internet.
happened?
Kata
A
was
transmission
attempting to say-
disruption can only mean one thing: invasion.
Project TRAP, anyone?
Yeah, memes aside, what Kata was trying to say was that the first high-profile NASA mission was Project Mercury, not Project Trap, because Mercury is not a trap.
Project TRAP.
Yeah.
Really?
Mercury is a trap, goddammit.
No,
Yeah,
they're
ah!
not.
Okay, let's keep the memes to a minimum. Come on.
Please.
God damn it.
Hey,
Kata, have you got anything else to continue, or do we consider you dead?
I need hydration.
We've lost Catter.
Consider yourself dead.
Consider you dead. Right.
I see the light at the end of the
Die.
tunnel.
Rabbit, I believe I asked you to get some information for this week about the space race era NASA.
Yep. All right. So basically, NASA was after it was set up by Eisenhower. Pretty much immediately, the space race began because essentially, right then was when the Soviet Union sent up their first satellite, which was named Satellite in Russian. Literally, that's what Sputnik means. It just means satellite. But yeah, the space race itself really actually began during World War II. Germany was actually developing supersonic missiles that they could essentially use without breaking the Treaty of Versailles, because the Treaty of Versailles banned cannons. Didn't say anything about missiles. So they're developing missiles to use against their enemies, and they actually used some of these supersonic missiles to bomb the UK at the end of the conflict.
V1
These
and
were the
V2.
these were the first things to actually make it into space. even though they didn't orbit the Earth, they got up there. After World War II, the United States launched Operation Paperclip. The Soviet Union also had a thing, but they didn't have a cool name for it, so sucks to be them. Also, basically, since the United States was, best friends with France and the UK during this time, the three portions of Germany that were essentially taken over kind of all became part of, under the US's jurisdiction, while the smaller part of Germany that was essentially taken over by the Soviet Union, they kind of divided it up. So we got more, and the Soviet Union still ended up ahead because they sent up a satellite first, and then they sent up a guy first, the first man in space, Yuri. What's his last name?
Gagarin.
Gagarin. Yeah. Interestingly enough, the first two Soviet citizens who basically died astronauts. Yuri didn't die, of course, in space. He died in a jet crash. But the first two Soviet astronauts to die, their wives were both named Valentina. Weird. Anyway, so yeah. The Soviets sent up a dog, then they sent up a guy, and then they sent up more guys, and then JFK said, "Hey, let's go to the moon," and so that's where we went. Actually, it's said that before Kennedy was assassinated, what he wanted to do was actually work with the Soviets on a space program, getting to the moon together. But then some jerk killed him, and Johnson didn't exactly have a good rapport with the Russians as Kennedy did, so yeah. Eventually, the U.S. did make it to the moon. First on the moon, yeah! And essentially, the Soviet space program was facing a lot of issues at that point, so that sucks. But doesn't suck for us because we made it to the moon. And then Nixon kind of canceled the Apollo program, but not before the U.S. and Russian space programs basically collaborated and made Soyuz and Apollo dock in space. So that was pretty cool. And that was basically the end of the space race, and then they put up the ISS, and now everybody's happy and colluding. There's no collusion. Sad.
Awesome. Yeah, the space race is one of those really interesting things that I wish we actually got to study more in Britain, because they kind of just skip over it. Do the Cold
I
War.
wish we got to study it more here in the U.S. too.
They skip over the Cold War and they go like, oh, and Berlin Wall, and then it was broken, and now it's modern history, and you're like, right, useful. Honestly,
what's that? I didn't learn about this.
I spent 6 years studying World War II history, and then they just went Berlin, and then it was broken, and now we're on modern history, and I was like, are you serious? Anyway, enough about my rant.
Wow. That's nice.
The
Because
UK
basically
education
here in the States, we basically spend 6 years on the pre-colonial period. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, we were a colony. Then we were the United States, and then Civil War. Okay, we're out of time. Have a good summer.
Yeah. Well, we're not meant to be talking about the education system. We're not talking about NASA. So, at this point, just so that we don't step on each other's toes, I asked everyone to find or to talk very briefly about their favorite NASA mission, like throughout all of NASA's history. So, does anyone want to start, or should we just go in alphabetical order and throw the ball back to Kata if he's still there?
No, wait, I gotta do some research on it.
I can do mine first.
Okay,
That's
cool.
fine. Yeah. So my favorite, and like even though it is my favorite, it might be someone else's favorite as well. But the Mars rovers, especially the Curiosity rover, are my favorite. Just because Like that was the cool thing that was happening in science when I was like in middle school, I think. Elementary, middle school. It's like, oh yeah, we landed a rover on Mars. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And
Like
I don't
simple
know.
things. Whenever you talk
Yeah.
to, like, I've been lucky enough to meet quite a few astronauts in my time, just because they come to London and it's like, yeah, I want to go meet you. So that's quite a good thing about living in the capital. But when you talk to all of them, especially Chris Hadfield, he'll always say like, whenever I've talked to any astronaut, their main inspiration, and whenever I've talked to any scientist, that's like done something really cool, their main inspiration is always what they saw when they were like 8 or 9. Just that point in your life is any experiences that happen to you then are what inspire you the most for the future. So things like
Yep.
that with like whatever was going on when you were like 8 or 9 will definitely inspire you the most. Like this, it's the same with my dad. My dad was 8 when when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and he's just been fascinated with the moon ever since. It's always the way it goes.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I like the Mars rovers. Rabbit, what's your favorite NASA mission?
Well, I've kind of got two.
Sure.
My favorites are Dawn and New Horizons, both together, because essentially, up until that point, I mean, I grew up reading the encyclopedia as a kid. I'm not going to lie. And so, since the encyclopedia was kind of old, it did still have pictures of, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and obviously Mars, Venus, and Mercury, and the Earth. But it didn't have Pluto because we hadn't reached it yet. Didn't have Ceres because we hadn't reached it yet. So basically, when Dawn and New Horizons were launched, literally right in 06 and 07, I'm like, finally, it's going to be finished. It'll be complete. Because 06 New Horizons launch, it's like, we're going to hit Pluto. We're going to get Pluto. We're finally going to get pictures sent back. At last. And then they're like, no, yeah, by the way, Pluto's not a planet anymore. Haha. But then they're like, actually, okay, it's a dwarf planet.
Frank.
Ceres is too. And then I'm like, oh, they're re-promoting Ceres? Cool. Hey, they're sending something to it? Even cooler. So then when they sent back pictures of Ceres in, what was it, 2015? Like, it was just after New Horizons would reach Pluto, which, it had a big old heart on it, so that's nice. But yeah, when they finally got pictures of both Ceres and Pluto, it's like, finally, we have a complete set.
That makes sense. I think
Yeah.
New
Nice.
Horizons is still going deep.
Yeah, it's going to be,
So-
well, and Dawn's still going too. It's, let's see, what is it doing right now? Yeah, it's still orbiting around Ceres right now, I believe.
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the deep space roads are really cool. And you're talking about the motion of Pluto. I remember very, very clearly my dad coming home from work with a newspaper in his hand, and the headline was Pluto no longer a planet. And I just remember his face of just disappointment, because it was about 2 weeks after I learned the order of the planets. And even to this day, I can't say it without Pluto on the end. But it was just I picked the wrong time to teach the order to my child, because yeah, I just remember. I can still picture the headline right now. But yeah, what a sad day for everyone.
Isn't that one small piece of luck?
Pluto's still a planet to me. Ceres is too. That's why I always include it in the planet order.
F.
And press F to pay
F.
respects. Yeah.
Have to pay respects.
It was discovered before Neptune. Ceres is more of a planet than Neptune is.
I mean, at least still classified as a planet, so
Oof.
Morgan, do you have a favorite NASA mission?
I don't have a favorite NASA mission for sure, but I have one of my favorite NASA oof.
That'll work.
I mean,
Freaking NASA oof.
What is it?
yeah, for
Okay, so basically, NASA sends some spacecraft to some planet. I don't remember what planet it is. It is Mars or Venus, I don't remember. But so they send this machine to test the density and the pressure of the surface, and they actually got it. But a few years later, someone realized that they may not be actually measuring the density of the planet because the lens cap spacecraft actually fell below the machine. So they actually do a pressure test on the lens cap and not the planet.
Wow.
Wow.
So like,
Wow.
oh, like, so
Ooh.
basically,
That's funny.
that you've got like when they do like pressures tests of the ground and density of the ground, they have effectively like a drill and it just pushes until it like gets through a little bit and it does like a little test. They do it with like meat and stuff. It's quite cool as well. They take like a little core and then squidge it basically. So I think that's probably what happened. The lens cap of one of the materials fell underneath, so they just did the density of the lens instead. Brilliant. Yeah, that totally counts as a NASA mission. I love it. Kata, have you done your research yet?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Since I made a big deal about it earlier, I might as well talk about Project Trap. Also known as Mercury or you Neanderthals.
So you're uneducated.
The uneducated swine.
Go on then, Kata.
Uncultured.
Let's hear it.
As I mentioned, Project Mercury was the first big NASA project which put astronauts into space. But what I found interesting while reading about it, they used goddamn chimpanzees to figure out if Mercury was actually safe. So if we can get an F for those chimpanzees, that'll be nice.
Fucking F.
So, obviously, Project Trap was important for just figuring out how they will be able to put humans into periods of time, stuff like that.
Cool.
But I'm still mostly interested about those chimpanzees. Goddamn.
Yeah,
They did.
it is unfortunate how many animals were sacrificed in space exploration.
Press F to press respects.
R.I.P. Leica.
Their sacrifices were not in vain.
Like a boss.
Rook, what's your favourite NASA
What a-
mission? /.
Well, my favorite sort of NASA mission is the International Space Station. I just like it because, well, it was launched in 1998, but I think the best part about it is that the ISIS program is a joint project between 5 different space agencies, being NASA, Roscosmos, bring him back, please. JAXA, or the Japanese Space Agency, ESA, the European Space Agency, and the CSA, the Canadian Space Agency. And the ISS is split into 2 different sectors, one being the Russian orbital sector and one being the United States orbital sector. But as I said before, both segments are shared by all the other nations, as I said before. And I just love how the International Space Station is a research laboratory for all crew on it in general biology, human biology, physics, astronomy, meteorology, and tons of other fields. And it really interests me, the International Space Station, because it's sort of what gets us into orbit, and then from there can send other projects to Mars and to the moon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It is a really cool mission.
Yeah, the international just like I think even when like Russian and American and like even European tensions are so like high down on Earth, just like to remember like a little bubble of peace kind of like floating around the Earth times is really nice. That's one of my
Like,
favorite things about
Mars,
science in
please.
general, though, is that just like almost no matter what is going on in the world, scientists will always get along, and just like a small hope that humanity does actually have some good in
And
there.
one thing I liked about it is that as of January 2018, the American portion of the ISS is being funded until 2025, and Roscosmos has endorsed the continued operation of the ISS through to 2024.
Cool.
So hopefully we continue funding after that.
Yep.
I mean, that's 26 years in orbit. That's crazy.
Well, they expect the it to operate at least until 2028. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is getting old. It does need some repairs, but
Yeah.
hopefully with
Yeah.
the new things going to Mars and everything, we'll be able to upgrade it with lots of new technology soon, and even new testing equipment that will help us get further than Mars. Talking about space stations, though, as Con mentioned earlier, my favourite NASA missions are some of the Mars rovers, just because I love Mars, and again, I grew up during the right time to just watch their progress.
Let's go.
Watch the Mars
But
missions.
one of my favorite NASA missions that I didn't live through, and I was told about probably only a couple of months ago, was Skylab. So this is NASA's space station before the International Space Station, orbiting from 1973 to 1979.
And
Base-
it
it
crashed
was-
and burned.
It did crash and burn. I'll get to that. So it was basically NASA's predecessor for the International Space Station, but it was just NASA. So American astronauts did some testing. I think only 2 could be up at once. They used the Apollo command modules to get people up and down, and some of the smaller Saturn rockets. And it was only operating from May 1973 to February 1974. Sorry. Apologise for my bad number readings. But one of the most interesting things about it isn't necessarily the research they did, which was actually really useful and, interesting enough, founded the way for the solar probe that's going towards the moon. The solar probe that's going towards the moon. Solar probe that's going towards the sun now, because one of its main pieces of research was about solar flares and the radioactivity and the effects that had on orbiting spacecraft. But the most interesting about its story is its decline. So in about 1978, the Americans, even though there was no people in it, because they were still tracking the probe, obviously, and they realised that bits were falling off of it, it was losing acceleration, and that Skylab was coming down. And so for months afterwards, there was almost international outcry about the fact that this pretty big space probe was going to fall from the sky, and because it was out of control, they had no fuel in it to really point it anywhere. They had absolutely no idea where it was going to land, and it caused some quite international outcry. There was I've lost where it was on my page now, but in I think it's Thailand, it caused the fear of the rocket landing on someone or some city caused so much international outcry that the Prime Minister had to appear on television, and just all these things. In the
People
end,
were dead, okay?
they realised it was going to come down within these next 4 days. They gave a different estimate to the European Space Agency's estimates, which again caused a little bit more outcry. They're like, what is happening? NASA tried to point it towards a safe field just south of Cape Town. It ended up landing 300 miles east of Perth in Australia, which just shows the accuracy of their measurements. And the funniest thing about this story is that Australia's response to it, instead of being to help NASA clear it up, although I do believe they let NASA retrieve the probe and the parts of it, was to send NASA a littering fine for $400.
Yep.
What they get?
Are those dollar dues? Or are they
Yeah,
dollar
we got $400 dues, mate.
So NASA didn't actually end up paying it, and instead it was paid on the 40th anniversary of the fine by a local Australian radio show.
Thanks a lot, NASA.
But if you go
Yeah.
to where it landed in Australia, they set up a little museum for it and still the original bits of Skylab. And if you are really, really interested, you can buy a tiny piece of the Skylab wall if you want to own a little piece of something that's been into space. So there you go. That's my roundabout Skylab that took way longer than
If I
thought.
accidentally drop it, will I get a $400 fine?
Depends if you drop. Oh, you do live in Australia, don't you? Yeah, then probably you will.
Yeah.
So, as we
Yeah.
are talking a lot longer about NASA than I anticipated, I'm going to skip the next two research segments, if that's okay with you, Morgan. And we will move on to the character himself, as we've just talked about science for a little while. Not that it's a bad idea, but everyone's got very enthusiastic this morning. So, I will briefly pull up some of the concept
Nice.
designs for NASA. So, again, just a normal disclaimer. These don't at all represent the final character. These are just our concept art, so you can see our process for him. So, we have Kata's moon shoes design. This is D-Pad's design with the tick, which we ended up adopting. Then you've got Raluki's crazy NASA with those lovely round glasses. And this was Neko's, I believe, concepts for NASA. So you can just see how like the different elements made it together into what ended up being the final design here. This is semi-final, I might add. This isn't in the art style of the show, one of the first characters created. This is drawn by Kata, but doesn't entirely represent how the character will look in the final show. So he's got his lab coat, he's got his clipboard, nice neat tie. And
He
yeah.
is ready for science.
So
Yeah, when
Ready for
I had to
anything.
design final version of NASA, I did all like Raluki's and D-Pad's designs.
Yeah.
I like the character.
So, Com, do you want to talk
It's
about
like how it
the
looks.
character of it for a little bit?
Sure.
Him, not it.
So, this is NASA. He is the crazy, sort of eccentric, very much obsessed with data collection nerd of the series.
Under budgeted.
Under budgeted, always.
Bless him.
He is the president of the robotics club at the school. He's older than the other characters in the show. But pretty much everything he does is in the pursuit of his own personal research. He sends probes everywhere, builds robots, collects data, harasses other students somewhat. And even though he is older, he doesn't usually act as mature as a lot of the other planets.
Don't forget the moon boots.
Do not forget the moon boots.
He can act very childish sometimes and gets carried away when he's trying to get something done. He tends to sort of ignore potential side effects and costs of what he's doing as sort of a nod to the amount of junk in space, Kessler syndrome, and stuff like that, if you've heard of it.
NASA
He
wasn't
does.
too environmentally friendly in the start of its
Oh.
existence.
No, it was not.
No, not at all. But
That's why they got a $400 fine.
he means well, and he maintains that everything he does serves a very good purpose, and that it's for the advancement of science. He isn't out to annoy or hurt people, but does end up stepping on a lot of toes at times. Appearance-wise, NASA is obviously, he has the blue hair and the red chevron in the middle as sort of a nod to the NASA logo. He's wearing his NASA lab coat with his insignia and the American flag on over the base Seoul Studios uniform. He also has his sort of special fun boots, which don't do
Moon
much.
shoes.
He thinks they look.
They're not
like he
They're
wears.
not special fun until he equips the moon shoes on top of the moon.
Go catch it, moon boots.
Yeah.
The
Don't
moon.
forget his little mystery button that we haven't explained yet.
Oh yes, I will quickly explain. So NASA has a little mystery button that he carries around with him everywhere. That's sort of like a multi-tool, or like it's sort of like a sonic wrench concept. If you've seen, what's it called?
Doctor somebody.
Doctor Who. I apologize. It's early in the morning.
Doctor what?
Doctor Who. No.
Doctor where? Doctor Win.
But yes. So
Dr. Howe.
NASA has this small tool that is sort of like a Swiss Army knife, but a lot crazier, that does a bunch of fun things that you'll have to wait and see for when you watch the show. But it's called Houston. And he can just push a button on it, and it'll collect data, it'll pop out a pen, it might dispense food. It's a crazy little... It
calls
creates
NASA an
Blues
idiot
of the
sometimes.
It can call NASA an idiot sometimes.
It's just it's almost his fun little robot, but it's not really a robot. It's just a big red button. Because we can resist having a big
The
red
biggest
button
red
in the show.
button.
The other
It's
memes
a big red
that
fun button.
we have around NASA include the moon shoes, as Poppy said before, and the fact that NASA is addicted to Go-Gurt.
All the Go-Gurt.
He loves Go-Gurt. It's so versatile and
It's compact, efficient nutrients, and he loves
makes a good projectile weapon.
So yeah, if you want to get NASA on your side, just buy a Costco load of Go-Gurt and you're all good to go.
Yeah.
It's easy to cosplay.
He is.
Cover yourself in Go-Gurt.
Yeah, I think he would make quite a good cosplay. Alright, see if I can persuade one of my friends to
Alright,
cosplay NASA
but-
when I go to conventions.
Oh, hell yeah.
I will do that for sure.
Well, because
As the
Marvin and I have been aiming to go to Comic-Con in London in October, so see if if he'll
nice.
do it. But yeah,
But
sorry to cut
yes.
you off.
No problem. But those are the sort of main points of NASA as a character. He's collects data, performs experience, does robotics, and just generally is a rather eccentric character that I think is going to be a fun addition to the show.
Yeah, I think everyone will love NASA. Everyone in the
What is
team
your
already
second
loves
point?
NASA, so I think that's a good point to be like, everyone's gonna love NASA. Thank you for that, Kong. Now, I will briefly talk to you now instead of a project lead, if you can put your voice actor head on for a second.
All right, let me switch it out.
So,
Okay.
Just puts on different glasses.
Time for the fun glasses.
as a voice actor, what is your view? So, what parts do you like of him? Are there any parts that you dislike about him, or that you think are too close to your character?
Well, as a voice actor, I think NASA is I voice him as he's very eccentric. He's high energy. He's always doing something. He's very curious, so he talks pretty quickly. He's not afraid to talk over people. He can get very excited, and he's sort of clueless a little bit in a way that he is more focused on what he thinks than what others think. As far as what I like about the character, I like that he's sort of this high energy character. It's different from me in real life as a character because I'm pretty low energy, but it is fun to play NASA when I am voicing him. Just because he is so different and so curious.
Fun fact, Com does indeed ingest a whole bunch of Go-Gurt beforehand.
Yeah.
That's how I get in character.
Yeah.
Just down 8 Go-Gurts.
Watch a couple of 90s films and just gets ready. Puts on his moon shoes.
Are there any? I know we haven't done too much voice acting yet, but what do you think has been the most difficult part about the bits you've done, for the April Fool's Day video? What was the most difficult part for you as a voice actor to what emotion or something?
I think for the most part his voice isn't that hard to do because it's mostly high energy. The hardest part about doing his voice is probably getting all of the voice lines done quickly and correctly, because he should speak quickly and be very curious and excited. So just trying to get it all said correctly when I myself don't speak very well. As the team very well knows, I do have a tendency to flub words. So speaking quickly only enhances how much flubbing I tend to do. So I do have to re-record a few times in order to get it right.
That's why acts as a lubricant.
What?
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 Hydration is important, guy.
Okay. What the fuck?
Finally, what are you looking forward to most about like his character in the show or to
I
portray?
am looking forward to having him start to interact with. I mean, this may sound kind of bad, but the fact that I think it's going to be fun to do the sort of parts and bits where he's sort of collecting data and semi-harassing the other characters and just being generally very excitable. Like sort of the, oh, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing over there? Can I collect that data? How are you doing?
Yeah.
And just being...
Are you gonna finish that croissant?
Oh, I hate to try and spoil it, but yeah, there are some interesting bits like that, I think, from like just from the Earth-Chan voice actor perspective. Like, yeah, those are some of my favourite bits as well. You'll have to wait and see about that, but yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for that. That was an incredibly long planet segment.
That was good.
So let's move on now to
Sponsored by Goga.
sponsored by Goga. Yes.
Solar
Sponsored,
Taylor
not
asks,
sponsored.
I want to quickly answer this question. Can you get hydrated with if you try hard enough? Yes.
You inhale fast enough,
Believe in
sure.
yourself,
Yeah,
you can
it
do
just
anything.
depends how much Goga. If you try.
Indeed.
If you believe in the heart of the good,
The good.
The power of Gert compels you.
So, on to the film club for this week. Now, as we are running low
Hell
on
yeah.
time, I would like just to quickly tell everyone to try and be a little bit briefer than last week. So, try and limit yourself to 2 minutes or
boy.
so. Okay?
That's enough from me, dog.
Yeah, but very
I
short.
wrote 5
Very short.
essay about it.
Short and sweet. Okay,
Short and
Casa,
sweet.
let's go.
oh hi. So basically, the film I'm talking about today is one of my childhood films that I enjoyed as a wee lad. If anyone's aware of the series Doraemon, some Nippon savagery films,
You mean a blue cat?
they have film series, and one of the one I'm talking about today is Nobita and the Castle of the Undersea Devil.
Oh, I
I
thought you
specifically
mentioned
chose.
that.
To be honest, I recommend all the film series because reasons, but I chose this one because good old Morgan. And one of the main points is a sentient talking car buggy.
Wait, what?
God damn it.
Sentient talking
Um,
car bunny.
God damn it.
What?
It's so
Yeah, it makes
basically
sense. It
the
makes sense.
main character Dory robot, and so he pulled a
Oh, dear.
Great.
there go. And basically, one of the gadgets he pulls out is a car that can drive underwater, and it's freaking amazing.
It
And
sounds it.
the car grows a relationship with his basically as the film
The mic.
You're cutting
The
out so
internet.
much. We can only get
The
every other
Australian
word,
internet.
but it still
Like every third word.
it still makes a really silly story.
if you see, but it's
We apologize, Australian
If
internet.
you see it, it makes
Let's take a
sense.
cut out.
Just see it.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
Doraemon.
you.
Australian internet.
Sorry
Sorry about my
sucks.
country.
I-
Sorry about my country.
I think what we've
sorry
got
about
from
Australia,
that
guys.
is that Doraemon is an incredibly crazy series, and if you want to understand it, you should
Yes.
probably watch it. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's been
No
going on
way you'll
for
understand it.
long,
If
and
you
you
want to
should
cry, watch the
because
last
of my
movie.
childhood.
The last movie is Stand By Me. It's so sad.
Oh no! Stand by Me is like 3 years old. There's more films that's come out of it. There's like
Wait,
one every
what?
year. There's one every year. I'm pretty sure.
They haven't killed Doraemon yet. Damn it.
Doraemon is an amazing series, and everyone should watch it.
Well, that's cool.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, moving on to Com.
Yes, my movie that I want to recommend this week.
Yeah, how can you beat sentient cars?
I don't know if it can beat the car, but Kimi no Na wa, or Your Name, is another anime film because we're all
weeb.
That's right. The dub is actually,
Wait, what's that?
even if you're not a weeb, the dub to this movie, the English dub, is fantastic. It's done very, very well. But Kimi no Na wa, Your Name is a sort of time travel romance story between a Tokyo city dweller and someone who lives in the middle of nowhere, Japan, or as in the middle of nowhere as you can get in Japan. Because let's be honest here, it's not that far in the middle of nowhere.
It is already in the middle of nowhere.
But anyway,
It's an island by the sea, and it's beautiful.
it's a really great sort of fantasy love story kind of thing. Really good movie, really emotional, great music, great characters, great story. They got a meteor in there, so there's some space involved. The animation is top class. If you haven't seen it already, I do highly recommend taking the 2 hours you have free and going ahead and watching it because it's fantastic. But
Cool.
that's all from me.
So yeah, definitely recommend from Weebs. Rabbit.
Yes.
Alrighty.
That's where we talk about Star Wars.
No, I'm not going to talk about Star Wars. I'm going to leave that to...
We're leaving that
I'm gonna leave that
in
to
episode
everybody
4.
else.
Yeah.
Come on.
You don't fight me, George Lucas.
Hey, I've got $4 billion. I'm going to buy out the entire continent of Australia.
Whoa. We will become Tatooine.
Already is.
Anyway,
my favorite of all time, that's Back to the Future. Basically, the premise is there's a teenager who befriended a scientist, and said scientist invents a time machine out of a DeLorean. If nobody knows what a DeLorean is, where have you been the past 30 years? DeLorean, basically, it was a car that it was designed to look super futuristic because it's got stainless steel panels instead of the current plastic crap that cars look like. So it's super futuristic looking, and basically it failed miserably because the British government kind of killed it. Thanks, UK. But yeah, they essentially planted cocaine on the on the guy who created the company, John DeLorean. Yay. But yeah, basically the car failed miserably, and then they decided to use it in this movie, and that's where the car became an icon. So a scientist creates a time machine out of a DeLorean that the teenager accidentally ends up sending himself to the past in, so that he meets his parents as teenagers, and accidentally interferes with their first meeting, thus putting himself into jeopardy. And so now he's got to get his parents back together so that, he'll be born and get back to the future.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very classic movie, but I'm sure definitely
yeah,
a good one
I
nonetheless.
also recommend this one. It's very good.
Awesome. Morgan, do you want to talk about your movie?
Yeah, I want to talk about time travel too. The movie is called Predestination. Okay, I can't specifically give the synopsis of the movie, so I will read it all from the text I gave.
All right.
And he drops.
Or not.
Morgan died.
Are you okay there?
You back, Morgan?
Okay, I'm back.
They sorry. Continue.
Okay,
Time travel is sick.
okay.
You stop driving at 50 miles per hour.
Yes, I am driving. Shut up.
Are you kidding?
Okay, give me 2 minutes. All right. Okay. John walked into a bar. He was drunk. The bartender said he will give him a bottle of wine for his life story. So John tell his life story. So apparently John is a female. He was kidnapped as an orphan, hired by the Space Corps, and he she met a man at the Cleveland College. She fell in love with the man and get pregnant, but the man left. And apparently, when she gave birth, she have two sex organs. So after giving birth, she have to revert her sex into a male. So after telling the story, the bartender said he can he can help him to help her kill the man who ruined his life. So when they travel back in time, he wait for the man who ruined her life. But when he was waiting for the man, a female was walked to him, and the female was himself. That's the movie.
Right, so it's kind of
Interesting.
like a
Whoa.
time travel paradox thing of like trying to go back and fix the past, but you find yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cool. A lot of time travel today then.
Yeah.
Rook,
Hmm.
you want to change genre?
Unfortunately, no. But what my movie is for today, I could not decide, so I just went with the one I knew I've always liked is Lord of the Rings. And if you haven't seen it, where the hell have you been? But Lord of the Rings is a fantasy movie about a really powerful, don't know what you'd call him, but a demigod who created a ring of power and gave a bunch of rings to different races to try to control them all. Humans and elves ended up defeating him, and the ring was lost. And this movie is about them finding this ring of immense power again and having to try to destroy it. So it follows the story of a hobbit called Frodo and the Fellowship of the Ring, which consists of a wizard, two humans, an elf, a dwarf, and three other hobbits. Pretty much, it's just about this hobbit Frodo and his best friend Sam trying to get to Mordor, to this volcanic mountain, to throw the ring in, because this mountain is the only way to destroy the ring. There's a lot of battles, there's an entire war between orcs, man and elves, and I haven't actually seen it in that long. I should watch it again. Talking about it makes me want to watch it again for like the
Must be a
12th
good movie
time.
then. I have to stop you
Oh,
there to avoid
and
spoilers.
yeah,
Yeah.
but my favorite character is Gimli, the dwarf, because I love dwarves. And may I ask you all, did you know that dwarves are natural sprinters?
No, I don't.
I
Yeah, that's why I put one inside of R2D2.
I can't really talk. I can't really talk too much about it without spoiling things here or
Yeah.
there. So
But it's
I've had to sort of really think about it. But it's a really good movie, and if you haven't watched it, just please pick it. I don't care if you pirate it. Just watch it, please.
it's such a classic. The books are such a classic. It's
The books are good too.
yeah, I definitely, if you like fantasy, again, like Rick was talking about Warhammer last week, if you like D&D, if you like the role-playing style and like fantasy, and you haven't seen The Lord of the Rings, what are you doing? Watch it.
I'm actually hosting a D&D game with members from the Earthchan server. So trust me, there's a lot of people in the Earthchan server who love fantasy, D&D, Warhammer, and just
So
all
yeah,
that.
if you like that, you're at home here. Anyway, I will quickly move on because we are. I will briefly talk about my movie, which you've probably done by
Sorry.
process of elimination. On I'm also talking about a film that was my childhood and probably the only film I have ever watched more than twice. I used to rewatch it over and over, and interesting enough, this is like kind of my origins as someone that likes science and space as well. So I thought I'd talk about it briefly. Not really something that most people would go away and watch, but honestly, it's such a ride, and it's only 45 minutes. I would recommend it. Maybe we'll host a movie night one night, and I'll get my DVD out, and everyone can watch Barney in Outer Space.
Hell bye.
That will be hilarious.
The
That
premise
sounds like fun.
The premise of it is that at the school where Barney is, they've set up an astronomy club, but the teacher falls asleep before they can actually do any astronomy. So Barney comes, turns a toy rocket from the classroom into a rocket, and they go into outer space to find a small alien child on a planet that is covered in rainbows. And they teach her how to sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and she shows them a robot, and then they fly home again, all before the teacher ends their nap.
Are you sure those kids not on
Does
drugs?
the teacher have narcolepsy?
What has the teacher been giving these kids? What the
It is quite amazing. The funniest thing about it though is that halfway through the movie they stop being absolutely crazy and dock with the International Space Station and invite a NASA astronaut on board.
There's something inside the cookie.
And so for like 5 minutes in the middle, it's an actual astronaut from NASA talking seriously about space travel. But and they're like flying through space, but the ship has like a gravity like Barney's ship has like a gravity connector thing on, so he's just standing on the floor and he doesn't question it. And my favourite bit is he opens the door and Barney's like, "Oh, hello, Jim," and he goes, "Hi, Barney, nice to see you up in space again." And it's like, what?
Again?
this space again?
Again.
So yeah, it's absolutely crazy movie, but it does have like they like talk about going to Mars and they go close to the sun and then they like go to an exoplanet, and it's absolutely crazy fantasy, but it was the thing that inspired me to love science. So I think we should watch it.
That's quite the movie to inspire you.
That's hilarious.
So if you want 45 minutes of side-splitting laughter and a little bit of 90s outfit cringe, watch Barney in Outer Space.
Time to get drunk and watch that. Holy shit!
I vote 100% on this.
Better than a robotic cat.
It is actually available
Is
on
it better
YouTube.
than a sentient cat going underwater?
Yes. You
Might
have
as
not
well
seen
be.
the pictures of the planet they visit.
Oh
yeah.
boy.
It is available on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube, so it's not that difficult to find. So
Oh,
I mean, that sounds like the next anime night right there.
yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely movie night.
Anyway,
When's
So-
movie night?
dream it on rabbit.
Just whenever we decide. Anyway, moving on.
yeah. So watch that. Okay. So that's
But
what
we
this
need
film club-
inspiration for the show.
More like Barney's hallucinogenic adventures. Yeah, you're not wrong.
That's for sure. Sounds like a
When
drug trip.
NASA
Can we have
takes in
Barney
too
as a
much
character
go
on the
good.
show? Barney Space Agency.
Barney's.
So no Roscoe Moss but Barney. Okay, I see how it is.
Oh.
Oh no.
Anyway, let's move on to more serious things again. So this is our little travel segment, globe trotting. So do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Just so we know when the pictures are up,
They
and
are
I'll go
up.
ahead and get
You're
started.
good
They
to
are
go.
up? All
Yep.
right. So on this week's segment of Globe Trotting, which is a little travel segment where we highlight sort of cool places on the earth that you can go and visit if you have enough money and time.
Well, I do.
Yeah, this week I'll be talking about Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada, which is where the Rocky Mountains are, if you've ever heard of them. So, Banff National Park was established in 1885 as Canada's very first big nationally protected park, and it exists on the border between Alberta and British Columbia, which is sort of over on the western side of Canada. And as you can see, it's quite a big park that encompasses a very, very beautiful sort of mountain pass segment of the Rocky Mountains. It's incredibly picturesque. There's mountains and big lakes everywhere. There's all sorts of cool rivers, there's lakes, and you could visit there in the summer and have a completely different experience than when you visit there in the winter. Because in the summer, there's not as much snow except for on the peaks of the mountains, and it's a very nice place to go hiking and camping and all that kind of things. But if you come back in the winter, it turns into just very, very cold. Everything's covered in snow. There's lots of skiing places that you can go, and there's glaciers you can walk on and ski and all that kind of stuff. It actually runs, or it doesn't run, but the continental divide of North America runs directly through Banff National Park. So that's, for those of you who don't know, a continental divide is where it's a split along the middle of the continent, where everything west of the continental divide, all of the rivers flow towards the Pacific Ocean, and to the east, all of the rivers flow into the Mississippi Basin and towards the Atlantic Ocean. So it's sort of like, that's geologically the split of the continent.
Oh, cool.
As far as just other stuff that's there, since it was Canada's first nationally protected park, it's because there's so many sort of animals and plants that are found there that are found other places but aren't really found other places because just massive human activity in a lot of places. But if you actually drive into the park and through the park, they have bridges made of like earth and dirt that go over the road that animals can use to cross instead of just crossing on the road and being hit by cars.
Ah. We have a few of those in Britain, but they never took off. The mice were too dumb to actually use them.
I kind of wish we had those, for people.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Like little climbing frames over the motorway.
But I guess my favorite part of the park, to cover that really quick, is a little secluded crater lake hidden in the mountains called Lake Louise. And it's a small little lake. It's in one of the pictures, the one that's, I guess I can't say being shown right now because there's a bit of a delay. But it's a lake with sort of a chateau hotel looking thing that was built next to it that you can stay at any point in the year. But in the winter, that entire lake freezes over and becomes a massive ice skating thing because they clear all the snow off of it. And you can just skate over the entire thing. And they build a big ice castle in the middle that you can go hang out in, which is really cool.
That's sick.
But
it
yes,
is such a picturesque place. I think that's the one because I can, like, without the delay. There's the castle showing on screen now.
yeah.
But yeah, wow, it is incredibly picturesque.
So if you ever get the chance to go there, it's very good. If you're ever in Calgary or Vancouver or something like that, I do recommend taking the day trip out. It's very close to Calgary, but it's quite a ways away from Vancouver and BC. But if you get the chance, do go and take a look at the scenery. It's breathtaking.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, Con. So now on to our last segment, which again I will try and keep short as possible, so not to keep everyone waiting. This week on the little eco-friendly protect segment, I want to talk about recycling and compost, but more so things that are extra that you can do, because a lot of the time people now are like, oh yeah, I recycle, I put things in and whatever, but there are so many simple things that you can do that the councils don't provide for you to do so easily that can make almost the extra difference. So that's what I want to talk about briefly this week. So I believe to start with, I asked everyone to make sure they knew like what kind of recycling they had available in their local area. So do you two Australians want to go first and talk about the Australian system briefly?
Sorry. Sorry, I just completely spaced out.
I was asking what the recycling like facilities are like in your area.
Well, since I'm a tradesman, I actually go to the tip quite a lot to get rid of a lot of the stuff on the job site. And in terms of our recycling, the initiative that we've been doing for it has been increasing quite a lot lately. The Australian government's been, and specifically the Victorian government, has been caring a lot more about our recycling and our waste disposal. And not only has the government been caring a lot more about it, but big business has with large grocery companies such as Coles and Woolworths have completely banned the usage of plastic bags in their stores, and have now gone to other alternatives, which you do have to pay for now, but that's a price to pay for the environment. And yeah, it's just really Australia's been caring a lot more about our environment recently, which is really good.
That's good to hear. Morgan, is like what's the recycling like where you're from?
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Here in Malaysia, recycling is not the biggest issue, I think, because we don't even recycle here. Uh, but during the recent years, there's been a lot of recycling centers that been built, but there's none in my area, so that sucks. But I still took the initiative to recycle, and drive to the nearest recycling center.
That's good. So it's not
Nice.
not too common over there. But maybe we'll talk about some things today that like will save you the drive. Rabbit, Com, do you want to talk? I mean, I'm sure you're in widely different states, and I'm sure America varies widely. But
You want to go first, Doom, or should I?
You can go first, I guess.
All right. Where I live in Texas, and specifically the Gulf Coast area, recycling and being environmentally friendly is unfortunately not our top priority, as we are sort of a oil-producing, oil-dependent region. We don't exactly have a super eco-friendly outlook, unfortunately. But my city specifically has introduced in the past 10 years a pretty extensive and widely available recycling collection program alongside of our regular waste disposal program. So now we can sort of collect all of our recycling together and put it out for collection by the city municipal services instead of having to drive out to recycling centers and do that, which I did used to do, not so much here, but when I lived up near Banff, actually in Calgary in Canada, they had various recycling centers that you could go to, because Calgary didn't have a recycling collection service, at least where I did, where we would collect cans and any sort of scrap metal and anything like that and drive it out to the recycling center. And they would give you sort of little coins, like 10-cent coins, like 5 cents a can and stuff like that. And that's how sort of I made money as a kid, was recycling stuff and collecting cans.
and that's a good way to do if you're like litter picking a park, and then you could get money for it. That's quite cute. Cool. Rabbit, what about you?
Well, out here in Illinois, we care slightly more than the Gulf Coast does, because, you know, Yeah.
Yes.
But unfortunately, even in Chicagoland, we're kind of bad about it. I know that in Chicago itself, recycling is hit or miss depending on the building you live in. Whereas right here where I live out in the western suburbs, they care slightly more, but also slightly less because, you know, it's like the western suburbs like, oh, we've got $1 bajillion, so whatever. I'm not one of the people who has $1 bajillion, unfortunately, but, you know, yeah. But my building does have a recycling service. So basically, you know, I mean, plastic, cans, all that good stuff, glass bottles, all that stuff. We put in the recycling, and yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's
Pretty
really
basic.
interesting actually, because I thought like, I guess you could call it like recycling collection was more common than it must be internationally. Because in Britain we
I
have
wish.
every like basically every house has recycling collection. Even the ones like in the middle of nowhere will still get collected, even though it might not be that frequently. They will still be have recycling collected like once a month, the same as rubbish. And the council.
I can't say, sorry to interrupt, but I can't say that like rural US, they don't do a lot of recycling service collection. They have recycling centers that you can go to, like scrap metal places. But just because everything in the Midwest and sort of the farming areas of the US, they don't do a lot of garbage or recycling collection just because everything's so far apart.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know why in my head I just assumed that they'd make the drive, but it doesn't make much sense really. But and also the British councils have quite a big thing about making sure that the rubbish, like landfill waste and the recycling, are collected as often as each other, so that you're not tempted to put stuff in the wrong bins. That's their kind of like thing. Like we have like in the city we have like rubbish collection on Monday and then recycling collection on Friday, so it's not too far apart. Apart from the fact that having rubbish collection on a Monday where we quite frequently have bank holidays is really stupid, because then you end up with like missed days and whatever. Anyway, the major problem with recycling in the UK at the moment is that instead of the government being like, this is our recycling program, they turn to the local councils and they're like, okay, so for your town, make a recycling program. And so every single town in the UK has different recycling bins with different colours and different procedures. Which is the stupidest thing.
Damn.
So this is like a standard set that I put on the screen, and it's quite useful like to have 3 or 4. But also it changes frequently. So I've lived in the same place all my life, but our recycling bins have changed about 8 times. I'm only 17, so that it's they just can't make up their mind. But basically we separate them and then they're collected and put into boxes and whatever. But we do also have tips and recycling centers for when you can't, like, it's not enough or whatever. So and also the tips have recycling for things that aren't collected, like batteries and mirror glass and scrap metal and washing machines, all sorts of things. And they're quite fun places to visit. They're just, I don't know how they are in the rest of the world, but in the UK it's like you drive up a massive bridge, and basically like you walk out over the edge and there's just tons and tons of skips, and the skips are all labelled, and then you have to find the right skip and chuck your stuff off the bridge into the skip, so it's quite fun. It is really hit or miss. You do miss the skips occasionally, and then the men down like at the bottom are like, hey, put them in the boxes. But yeah, it used to be quite a fun trip when I was little. Anyway, I will quickly move on. So nobody mentioned food waste that much, so I presume like council composting isn't something that happens too frequently around the world either.
There's no composting that happens
Compost.
here.
We have compost here, but as I said, it's sort of the whole initiative that we're doing at the moment.
Cool. So one of the things that they've brought back in the UK recently is council composting, but I think actually, like in my experience, that doing it at home is actually almost more beneficial, because one good thing about council composting is that you can put meat scraps and stuff in because they do it in like closed containers. But in the compost that we have at home, we can put things that the council wouldn't take because they'd be considered contaminated in. So one of the major problems with recycling collection, and even like going to tips, is that they are much more picky with what they actually recycle than they tell you. And so a lot of the stuff that people put in recycling bins actually does end up getting landfilled. So it's important to separate things and to like read up on the local guidelines. So one thing they have in the UK is that with glass and plastics, if there is what they call contamination on it, as in if there's any dirt or food or anything whatsoever, they will chuck away everything that was in the same bin. And so if all of the bins on the street were put in and like one can had some like baked beans in the bottom of it, they chuck away like almost all of that from the same street, which means that a lot of the stuff that you've tried to recycle is actually going to landfill. So if you're recycling, to like make sure to like rinse through your bottles and stuff, makes the world of a difference, because it means it actually gets recycled. But one of the things, like obviously if you're doing home compost, then contamination by things like paper tissues that you can't usually recycle isn't too much of a problem. So if you've got a cold, all those tissue can go on the compost. It's actually quite a good safe disposal for things like bank documents. Shred them, put them on the compost, all the worms eat them, gone forever. No chances of that being destroyed, which is shredded paper. And shredded paper is a very important thing to put on the compost. And I think the other misconception in the UK commonly about compost is that it's hard to do, but it actually really isn't. All you need is a shady area in the garden or like behind a fence, a bin with a lid on it, and to produce some food waste, which everyone does. There's 3 things that need to go into compost: green waste, so things like grass cuttings; brown waste, things like apple peelings; and to make sure everything's moist, so just to sprinkle some water on top. Every couple of weeks, pick up the bin and shake it, and you make compost out the bottom. It's really not that difficult. So if I say anything to you one week, if you don't have a compost at home and are in a position where you could, to just read up about it. There's so many guides online to how to do it, like perfect for gardeners, but if you just look up simple compost guides, it's really not that difficult. You can even buy purpose-built things for like indoors where you just put little scraps in. So that would be my tip for this week, is to try composting. And who knows, maybe all those flowers that you planted for the bees yesterday will thank you for the extra nutrients in a year's time.
Bees. Bees.
Not the bees.
Did you know all according to all laws of known aviation, there's no way a bee should be able to fly.
I shouldn't have mentioned bees. Anyway, let's wrap this up now, because we have talked a lot longer about NASA than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for putting up with the slightly longer than usual time. Up next time, we will finally have Mercury. Hopefully, pecan, please. So learn about Mercury, who isn't a trap. Get to talk to Pecan, the voice actor. You get to see some more designs and stuff, and get to see the art drought that was Mercury's production.
Mercury is a trap, goddammit.
Mercury is not a trap.
We will be sharing our favorite animes and recommending some anime next week. So all you weebs, get ready for that.
Oh boy.
And I'm not sure who we'll have on Globetrotting next week, but someone will be showing some picturesque landscapes, and we will be talking about something to help the Earth that I also haven't decided yet. Planning in advance is great. Anyway, that's all from us this week. Thank you very much for coming.
Best planet.
If you're just listening, this week we have had Kata, Com, Rabbit, Morgan, Rook, and me, SpaceFlower. That's all from us. Please have a very good week. Please stay hydrated, and remember, Earth Chat.
Always.